Henry and Terry Henshaw were two astronauts who bravely traveled the vast empty of space aboard the ill-fated Excalibur mission. Named after the LexCorp shuttle Excalibur, the four-person crew of the Henshaws, Henry or Hank and Terry, Jim Garrison, and just Steve, likely knew and assumed the risk of space travel for humans, but they probably didn't assume one thing. They were traveling in space, in a comic book. As if it is almost destiny for any human space traveler in comics, the Excalibur crew was heavily exposed to cosmic radiation, subsequently causing the shuttle to crash. The bodies of the two crew members, Jim and Steve, were completely destroyed, but in a sort of homage to Marvel's Fantastic Four, we saw Steve return with a body made of the cosmic energy that destroyed him. Fire. Jim returned as items gathered from the shuttle crash, Earth, nature, and metal alike. A thing. Though these two returned, it was not for long, as they both went a bit mad and ended their lives via the sun or an MRI booth. Magnets, metal, not a good mix. The Henshaws saw a different fate. They both initially appeared unharmed, aside from a hair color change for Hank. His hair had turned from black into bright white. Hank and Terry didn't stay unscathed for long. Henry watched his wife slowly phase into an alternate dimension, or turn invisible, if you will, while his own body was rapidly breaking down and decaying. Hank was ultimately able to save Terry, but not himself, as his body finally gave out to the decay caused by the radiation. Hank Henshaw died almost immediately after saving his wife, Terry, leaving her the sole survivor. Cut to a later time in Metropolis, where a city is in mourning. This time not for the Excalibur crew who did not survive, but for the loss of their champion, their protector and hero, their Superman. After a mysterious monster appeared on Earth heading straight for Metropolis and beyond, Superman answered the call to stop the threat, but found himself face to face with Doomsday. After an epic battle across several months, comic issues, and series, Superman and Doomsday both fell after landing one final blow on each other. But the city did not mourn for long, because a new protector emerged, or an old protector returned, remade? A cyborg humanoid with a partially visible metallic endoskeleton and visible humanoid flesh covering the rest appeared dressed as Superman, not only in costume, but in appearance. The humanoid parts were identical to Clark Kent or Superman. They tested as Kryptonian cells and claimed to be Superman reborn. Everything checked out. The cells of the flesh, the metals of the endoskeleton, the foggy but correct memories, down to heroic efforts as large as protecting the President of the United States. The world was convinced. Metropolis was convinced. Lois was mostly convinced. But this wasn't reality. It's no coincidence that this cyborg Superman looked a lot like one of James Cameron's Terminators. This cyborg was not here with altruistic intentions. Hank Henshaw never really died that fateful day. He transferred his consciousness and was able to leave Earth to explore the cosmos. His ability to interact with the Kryptonian birthing matrix provided him the knowledge to build this genetically accurate body, and his partnership with Mongol gave him the means to exact revenge on Superman via the planet he held so dear, Earth. That's right. Turns out Cyborg Superman was a phony working for Mongol the whole time. The whole time, Lois. Henshaw's attempts to turn cities into engine cities for Mongol were ultimately stopped by the other Supermen, Steel, Superboy, Eradicator, and a returned Clark Kent. Henshaw was even responsible for restoring Superman's powers in an attempt to destroy him. The restored true Superman was able to easily destroy Henshaw's cyborg body, ending the global threat. Was this the end of Henshaw and his consciousness? Well, definitely in that form and in that moment. But collectors can now have a fantastic representation of this character in perfect time for the 30th anniversary of the story, thanks to the team at Medicom and their Mafex line's latest release. Hey everyone, my name is Jonathan, aka JK of JK Collects, and in this episode we are taking a closer look at the Medicom Mafex Return of Superman, Cyborg Superman. Hey everyone, welcome back, and there he is, old swanky Hanky himself, aka Cyborg Superman. Very excited to have this one. As you know, major Superman fan, also major fan of the Death of Superman series. So I'm just happy to see that Mafex has these coming out. And then I did notice, right, so McFarlane Toys has some things coming out. But we'll talk about that as they come and a little bit later. So here we go. Let's take a look at the back of this. So there's our normal pictures slash renders. Never quite certain what they are when it comes to these because it looks so close to what the actual figure is, and the figure truly does practically look like a rendering, right? But there he is. There's everything that it comes with it. Such a cool looking figure. I'm very excited about this one. But yeah, Mafex number 164. Down here at the bottom, we got our good old hologram logo. There he is, taking flight. Old Swanky Hanky himself. Looking tough, mildly confused, also evil, but there we go, a good old glare of all that plastic protectiveness in there. So how about we open it up and get rid of some of that plastic protectiveness and take a closer look at this figure itself. What do you say? That's what we came here for. Yeah, so as I was mentioning, right, so McFarlane Toys is starting to show some signs of things along the lines of the Death of Superman, right? Or at least the return. Okay, so there we go. Empty box. I'm going to move that to the side. Right, so the Eradicator. We've seen the Eradicator in advertisements and whatnot. There's our good old Medicom with the QR code talking about that hidden tag thing to scan it. So interesting to see that because, right, there was a thing on Instagram today, the day that this was filmed, where they're saying it's shown up in Walmart, right? So it's a gold label for that Eradicator. So a little concerned about that one, right? Normally they don't really play that game. Normally it's, hey, this has launched for order or pre-order on Walmart. So there's our Medicom stand. Always happy to see that, right? It's good for those flight poses, especially with someone like a version of Superman or lack thereof. So yeah, I'm just going to go on record by saying a little concerned about the ability to get a hold of an Eradicator, at least the McFarlane Toys version. So going to keep our eyes out for that, and hopefully we can get a hold of one. If you have a need, we do have the fortune of being able to get to a lot of Walmart, so please use that at JK Collects on Instagram and reach out to us if you need some help trying to track one of those down. We're always happy to do our very best. But there we go. So let's get to the topic at hand, right? So let's pull old Swanky Hanky out of here and get all these accessories. Love these sets of hands and everything. It's just so cool. I'm very excited to have this figure. I know he's a bad guy, but just because he's a bad guy doesn't mean he's a bad guy as far as figures go, right? Okay, so first and foremost, let's take a look at these accessories. Let me change it to manual because we might need to get a little bit, there we go, some detail on these blast effects, right? So just straight shot blast effects, and they're basically the same thing, right? So that same cast idea. So I'm going to put one to the side. We don't need both of them out here. But there we go, right? So it doesn't come to a point, which I kind of like that a little bit better than a lot of the ones that we see, right? Because it does have texture or different little tips on the end of it. But it's not that tiny little point that comes that always ends up curved and bent and all that stuff. You know what I mean. But it is still a transparent to translucent, right? So it's a transparent plastic. It looks like they cast it in this yellow transparent, but then they use some paint to kind of give it some more character, right? So the white almost looks like an onion right there. If you just pulled it out of the ground, you know, the wild onions you can find out there. But, I digress. It is a blast effect, and I'm excited about it. So not really much flex because it is just standard plastic. It's not really a flexible plastic. Even these little offshoots coming off, right? So little flames. It's all a very solid plastic. So we'll see how that works out with this, the good old arm hand cannon, right? So remember how you can transform and get this thing to pop out instead of a hand? So there's one of them. And look at this thing. Just so cool. I'm loving the paint job and I'm loving the detail on this thing. So look at this. Let me see how close we can get so you can really see. I mean, look at that. All right, so the metal looks, it just has an absolute metallic look to it, right? It's obviously plastic. It is obviously cast plastic, but it is then painted in this metallic silver, and they did a fantastic job, right? So even though it has probably just flaws to it, right, in the plastic, these flaws make it look even more metallic, right? Because it's just imperfect. It seems like it's had some fights ready for battle. But then the details, they got the black in this little line here, a little bit of grayish black in there. And it's not like just a flat black, right? So it's like a gray, gets a good shine to it. I mean, and it's just perfectly in these lines for the detail. This is a fantastic job for the hoses, right? To show that flexible metal tubing that you can have, having that little bit of highlight to it, just so fantastic. Now these don't seem to have the paint, right? These just kind of go with using the recessed part instead of having that paint help pop it like it does back here. So curious that they made that decision, and it is flexible, so maybe that's why, right? These are kind of a flexible rubbery plastic, so maybe that's why they chose not to do the paint, because the more you flex it, the more it could possibly deteriorate and flake off. But the way that the rest of it is done, I can absolutely forgive that. I will totally give that a pass because it's not a detractor. It still looks good. It just doesn't have that extra pop that one line right there does. Yeah. But the rest of it is just fantastic. And let's check out how these blast effects pop in there, right? So we got one, and can both of them go in there at the same time? Yes, they can. I'm probably not doing it the best way so that they don't interfere. There's there we go. There's a little bit cleaner way. I think if I mess with it a little bit, see, they're almost coming out straight. So that is just fantastic. Very cool. Okay, taking a look at the hands, right? So each of them is a human or Kryptonian hand type, we'll say. And then the other one is a Kryptonian metals, right? So he was able to even reproduce Kryptonian style metals by having access to that birthing chamber. He learned so much knowledge about their technology. But there we go. So the hand, this one is definitely a hand, right? So you've got the defined fingernails. It's not something that was a glove hand for something else that they just repainted. But what really stands out here is the metallic hands. So yet again, we've got that fantastic paint job with the black properly put in all the places necessary to just really make it stand out. And it absolutely looks like that Cyborg Superman. So fantastic, right? So there's kind of an open hand, that typically comes with it. Here's a little bit more of a neutral, right? So the regular hand, let's take a look. Yeah, we do have actual defined fingernails there, and they never really go. There's a lot of casting flash on that one right there. So that's that's a little bit of a surprise. You see that on those two fingers, the ring finger and the pinky. A little bit of casting flash showing through on there. That's kind of a surprise, to be honest. But with these hands, there's never really a whole lot of excess detail because it is a comic book / cartoony hand, right? But with the metal, you kind of have to. But still, it's a metal hand, but somehow it's able to look like a regular hand and just needs those very few points of articulation. But you know what? I don't know how that stuff's made. And here's the ninja chop / flight hand. That's the typical Superman hand. And I just appreciate that they didn't cut corners with this. I mean, these are sculpted in lines. It's not just a hand that was repainted to look like a metallic hand. This is truly a completely freshly sculpted metallic hand. And then these have the visible fingernail, so it's not a repainted gloved hand for someone. Like, we'll see it sometimes. And this one is number one, right? This is the Saturday Night Fever dance hand, or just pointing, I'm mad at you, and then here's a good old fist, right? So what a commanding one, right? So you got this one pointing at you, and then fist cocked back up in the air, ready to swing. I wouldn't want to be on the receiving end of either of those, but there we go. Yeah, so yet again, masterfully done little hand there. And then this one, we do have a defined thumbnail, so there we go. Yeah, nice to see. A little bit of imperfection right there on that finger. See that? It's got like a little wart going on there. But you know what? Maybe Hank Henshaw had warts. But that's it for accessories. Let's look at the guy himself. So let's get all this plastic out of here. We got that nice sheet protecting the body and the cape. This one that goes right in the middle. I like to just pull them out because I'm not really thrilled about the idea of just intentionally detaching these joints unless I absolutely have to. And fortunately, they have that slit, so most of them will pull out with just a little bit of coaxing sometimes. Maybe they get a little bit of a stretch. But before I really dive in like the normal stuff, I am excited to see this, right? So Cyborg Superman has always had those massive, like, 90s shoulder pad thing look going on with the cape, right? And they put these little kind of like crow's feet in there to make that happen. I mean, how cool is that? What a fun little detail. It does take a little bit of positioning with the cape to make that seam not visible. Do you see that? So I'll have to play with that when it comes down time to posing. But that's one thing that kind of stands out with that is even just quick positioning, you can kind of see it. But if you can't see it on this side, that means there is work that I can do that's going to make it be all right on that side. So let me change the focus so it keeps up. All right, so let's take a closer look at this guy. What do you say? Here's the good old head, and look at that. I mean, if I wasn't already amazed by the sculpting on this thing, look at that. I mean, talk about just that 90s big-time Terminator phase where everything was just popular with those, the endoskeleton, the robot and all that, the cyborgs. Just so cool. And then just the hint right here of that flesh. And look how thick it is, right? So look at that line right there of how that flesh was on there. But just very cool. Let's look at that, just the sculpting on this head. I mean, the metallic teeth, the red eye, that red chin, that little open spot right there, and the round on the side. I can see the black, it's a little imperfect on this line, I will say, as far as the paint. But then if you look at the rest of it, it's just so well done. So pleased with this. Yeah, I know he's a bad guy, but gosh, he's so great. He's still a version of Superman, right? Flesh and metallic bone. So there we go. But let's take a look at, the other side. You can tell this was definitely a Superman head sculpt. It's like they started with it and then just kind of ripped it apart and sculpted that metallic head under it and then maybe laid that on it or something. But anyway, let's check out the movement. So the neck is separate from the torso, so it does help with some of the shifting. But side to side, it's pretty good, as usual, right? So it's on that normal post with the ball, right? The little the dumbbell joint right up in there. And that's that thing where you can kind of, depending on what you want to do, you can turn that to give the head a little bit more capability as far as like if you're trying to do the look up a little bit more, or the look down, which he can easily go chin to chest right there, chin to metallic chest. But yeah, so the movement is great. We can, I'm gonna say we can do the good old full exorcist rotation. The neck tried to travel with it, but it doesn't have to, right? The neck doesn't have to do the work. The head can do it, and it does get caught a little bit on the thickness of the neck, but it goes around with no issue, and I'm not really too concerned about any kind of paint rub or anything like that. All right, so let's pull this cape a little bit, and I love that it's wired all the way down the front and down the side and down the back, I should say. So we've got side wires, back wires, so that is fantastic, right? Which means I can pose it out of the way. We've got a good butterfly joint in there. I say good, but it seems almost a little sloppy. I don't know what it is about it, but it's not quite as nice as I'm used to with other ones. Maybe it's because they knew that a lot of times, maybe the cape was going to cover it, but still, that's a huge gap that's creating right there. Not enough to kill it for me, but, for some, that might be a bit much. Good rotation on it, and then, of course, we've got the bicep-tricep rotation, which does have the musculature and that shape that goes around it, but it does not get hindered or anything like that. We have a double elbow, which has excellent flexibility despite the musculature, right? So a lot of times that can be a hindrance and it holds the arm back. We do not have any kind of forearm or elbow rotation, but we do have wrist, and we've got good full-on wiggle capability with the wrist because it is that double pin kind of joint right there. And then this is a fist hand. So we have two fists, right? This one's a little bit tighter, and this one's kind of a little bit more open, right? It's like it's going into a fist. This one's fully balled, this one's not quite. And then, of course, on the other side, we do have a fully balled up metallic fist to match the fully balled up humanoid fist. But, and we're going to go a little bit astray from norm. Normally I just say, hey, this other side has that same functionality and articulation. And it does, but by gosh, if it's not sculpted beautifully in a metallic format, right? So, I mean, look at here on the back. This is some of the beauty right there. So look at all the detail on these cables going on back here. That didn't have to happen. That could have easily been left alone. It could not have had that black paint detail in there, but it's there. And look how high it goes up into that joint, right? So that's pretty high up in there. And that's great for that flexibility, right? And then we've got even the butterfly joint all the way in there. All of it is that gray with the black highlights in it. And I mean, just look at it. It's so magnificently done. I am just thrilled with this figure. We do have that mid-torso or lower rib cage rotation, and this has full rotation, so it's not just a forward back. We've got side to side, and like I said, we've got sculpting pretty far up So even when we tilt it from side to side, it's not too bad. Back does kind of start to create a little bit of a gap. Forward does, let's see what happens. There we go. Yeah, so forward, if you want to tilt it, you got a gap, but I mean, look how high that cable work goes. It definitely prevents that loss of the visual that happens on there, right? Waist rotation, pretty good. Easy to get a gap right there, though. So, I mean, that might have been a little bit of an opportunity. However, what I will say to give maybe a little bit of an excuse is it was a little bit difficult because of the way that this is done. However, right here and here do end up being that same thing that you would have with the obliques, right? So those side muscles, this kind of ends up that same point right there. So it's just not quite as tight as this could be on there, but not too bad. It just gives that ability to flex. It doesn't create any kind of weird plateaus, but it can easily create a gap right there, depending on how it's posed. But this is that flexible, rubbery plastic. We've got, speaking of flexibility, pretty decent, right? Almost got the super split going on right there. And this does kind of flex out of the way, but not, it's not causing too much of a hindrance to prevent it from going up. Now we do have this line right here, but that does not give upper thigh rotation, right? That's just a line, which would have been a great spot to hide it. But if you're going to do it here, you'd have to do it here, and there's not really an opportunity, right? You've only got a little bit of Cyborg shining through over here. But with this full leg, we have a double knee, which has excellent flexibility for getting ready for the Superman 500 or Superman 5K. You know what? We'll say it's a Superman marathon. How about that? But there we go. So good flexibility there. And this does have good rotation on that, which does not give a major gap to make up for the lack of that upper thigh rotation. Forward kick, back not too bad. Forward creates a little bit of a gap right there, if depending on how you do it, right? So a little bit less natural, a little bit more natural of a kick, leaves a little less of a gap. We don't have any ankle rotation, or I'm sorry, not ankle, but calf rotation, we should say. Even though there are boots, there's not really an opportunity to hide it. I love that there is a sculpted metal boot on here. I mean, when he had the body made, he went with detail. He wanted to look like Superman. But here we go. We do have good ankle rotation. Now that we're talking about the ankle, and good forward and backward, right, on the foot. So not bad at all. And of course, even though he's a cyborg, he can still break his ankle. Why not, right? If it's an ankle, it can be broken. And he has good toe articulation on both, right? So we've got that same functionality on this majority Kryptonian human leg, right? He has a massive fraud, but still, it is Kryptonian DNA and Kryptonian flesh and metals. So there we go. He did his research, is what I'll say. All right, so in kind of looking at it, we were able to see any kind of major paint issues. Obviously, on the head, nothing really stood out except that line right there was a little imperfect, right? You see a little wavy. The S, not bad, right? Not bad at all. You can see where it's raised a little bit on the metallic part here. It's not that way over here necessarily. It doesn't look like it's off-centered or anything. It's just interesting that it's raised. It may be ever so slightly up just a little bit, but not enough to really be an issue. It still looks like it is certainly centered as far as the blue and the gray transition right here at the point. So that would be one of the points where I'd be like, if that was off, that would look really bad. And then the transitions, not terrible. I can't honestly tell if this is blue paint or reflection. I think that is a little bit of blue paint actually maybe that got over on that. It's tough to say. In looking at it in person, it looks like it is blue paint. I know on the camera it probably looks like it's reflection, but that does look like a little bit kind of oversprayed over. A little bit of redundancy in repetition. And then of course the yellow painted on the red. Very well done, right? So it's a nice thick coat of yellow. So it doesn't really have a lot of red showing through. There's some occasional spots where maybe it kind of bled over a little bit or things like that. But I mean, just look back here on the back, even having that stuff painted, any tiny flaw like that, I'm going to absolutely give it a buy because they just absolutely killed it with the detail on the metallic legs and metallic parts. And just this right here, honestly, I know it sounds silly, but that sold it for me, hands down. It is so cool. It looks really cool on camera. It looks even more amazing in person, I gotta say. But there we go. Yeah, so I mean, no real paint issues to speak of, nothing that stands out or any kind of flaws or issues like that. I mean, it's that typical quality you can expect from Medicom with their Mafex line, right? So, and I do want to play with the cape a little bit to see if I can figure out how to make that seam of that shoulder pad hide. But, you know, as I'm prattling on, I am messing with it. But the ultimate thing is, how easily does he stand on his own? And there it is. Okay, well, there we have it. That is our guy. Well, that about brings us to the end of this episode. Thank you, as always, for joining us. If we ever do a review of something you are looking for yourself, please follow us and DM us on Instagram at JKCollectsToys so we can help with the search if we do not already have a way of getting one. Also, if you enjoyed this episode, let us know, and let YouTube know by subscribing and clicking that like button. The more that happens, the more YouTube recommends us, so we can hopefully reach more collectors and help them find what they need. If you'd like to see some more videos, we do have some links on your screen right now for you to check out. But remember, as always, collecting or not, we are all in this world together. Let's look out for each other. Thanks.